Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed the cleaning cart down the gleaming corridors of the intergalactic research station Omega-7. The late shift was always the hardest, but it paid better, and every extra credit mattered when you were raising a child alone. The station hummed with the quiet efficiency of night operations, most of the alien researchers having retired to their quarters hours ago. He paused outside Laboratory Section C, checking his watch. 2:47 a.m. Almost time to pick up Zara from the station's childcare facility. His daughter would be waiting, probably having spent the evening reading her textbooks in ways that still amazed and puzzled him. Marcus had found Zara 3 years ago during a salvage operation on the abandoned mining colony of Kepler 442b. He'd been part of a cleanup crew, one of the few jobs humans could get in the outer systems where their lack of advanced technology made them suitable only for manual labor. The colony had been evacuated after a reactor leak, leaving behind empty buildings and the detritus of a failed settlement. She'd been hiding in the ruins of what looked like a research facility, a small child with pale lavender skin, large dark eyes that didn't seem to focus on anything, and delicate features that spoke of a species he'd never encountered. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, malnourished, and terrified, speaking in a language that the station's translators couldn't identify. The authorities had wanted to place her in an alien orphanage, but something about the way she'd clung to Marcus's hand had made him fight the bureaucracy. Humans weren't typically allowed to adopt alien children, but Marcus had persistence born of desperation. His own daughter had died in the plague that swept through the human colonies 5 years earlier, along with his wife. The empty space in his heart had found an unexpected way to heal. The adoption process had been nightmarish. Endless forms, medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and legal hurdles that seemed designed to break his spirit. But Marcus had worked double shifts, saved every credit, and refused to give up. When the final approval came through, he'd cried in the courthouse hallway while Zara stood beside him, her unfocused eyes somehow seeming to understand that they were finally family. The medical scans had revealed the cruel reality of Zara's condition. Her species, which the xenobiologists eventually identified as Luminar, possessed incredibly sophisticated optical organs that could perceive across multiple spectrums of light. But Zara's had been damaged, whether by birth defect, injury, or disease, no one could say. The delicate neural pathways that should have connected her eyes to her brain showed significant scarring and disruption. She was, by every medical standard they could apply, completely blind. But Marcus had learned to question those standards. In the first months after the adoption, he'd noticed things that didn't quite fit the diagnosis. Zara never bumped into furniture, even in their cramped quarters aboard the station. She could navigate crowded corridors without a guide. When she read her books, her fingers would trace the pages, but not in the methodical pattern of someone learning Braille. Instead, she seemed to absorb information at an impossible rate, finishing texts that should have taken days in mere hours. The other humans on the station thought he was imagining things, seeing what he wanted to see in a father's desperate hope. Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's human medical officer, had gently suggested that Zara might have developed enhanced hearing or spatial awareness to compensate for her blindness. It was common in many species, she'd explained, for other senses to become heightened when sight was lost. But Marcus knew there was more to it. He'd caught glimpses of something extraordinary in quiet moments when Zara thought no one was watching. The way she would turn her head to look at things that made no sound. How she could find objects in dark rooms without fumbling. The strange way she would sometimes tilt her head and smile as if seeing something beautiful that he couldn't perceive. Tonight felt different somehow. As Marcus finished cleaning the last laboratory, he found himself thinking about the conversation he'd overheard earlier between two Valdrian researchers. They'd been speaking in hushed tones about anomalous energy readings in the lower levels of the station, something about quantum fluctuations that shouldn't be possible with current technology. The Valdrians were one of the most technologically advanced species in the known galaxy. Their understanding of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation far beyond human comprehension. If they were puzzled by something, it had to be significant. Marcus locked away his cleaning supplies and headed toward the child care facility. The corridors were dimmer during night shift, with only emergency lighting to guide the way. Most species could see perfectly well in conditions that would leave humans stumbling in the dark, another reminder of humanity's limitations in this vast cosmos of more evolved beings. The child care facility was a marvel of interspecies design, with environments tailored to the needs of dozens of different alien children. There were sections with methane atmospheres for the Zephyrian younglings, gravity-adjusted play areas for species from high-G worlds, and sensory deprivation chambers for the telepathic children who needed quiet from the constant mental chatter of station life. Zara was in the human-compatible section, sitting cross-legged on a cushion with a quantum physics textbook in her lap. At 8 years old, she was reading material that would challenge university students, her small fingers moving across the pages in that peculiar way that had become familiar to Marcus. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus called softly as he entered the room. Zara's head turned toward him immediately, and her face lit up with the kind of smile that made all the long hours and endless worries worthwhile. She carefully closed the book and stood, moving toward him with a fluid grace that never failed to amaze the other parents. "Dad, did you know that quantum entanglement can occur across galactic distances, but only under specific conditions involving dark matter fluctuations?" she said, as if discussing the weather. Marcus chuckled and scooped her up in a hug. At 8, she was getting too big for this, but she never complained. "I did not know that. Learn anything else interesting tonight?" Mrs. Kellen was reading us stories about the old human space explorers, Zara said, settling into the crook of his arm as they walked toward their quarters. She said humans were the first species to travel between star systems using primitive chemical rockets. "That's amazing, Dad. Most species develop faster than light travel before they even leave their home system." "Yeah, well, humans have always been good at doing things the hard way," Marcus replied, navigating the quiet corridors with practiced ease. "Is that why you work so hard?" Zara asked, her voice soft with the kind of perception that sometimes caught Marcus off guard. He paused in the middle of the corridor, looking down at his daughter's upturned face. Her eyes were the deep purple-black of space itself, beautiful but seemingly empty of sight. Yet sometimes, like now, he felt as though she could see straight through to his soul. "I work hard because I love you," he said simply, "and because I want to make sure you have everything you need to grow up strong and smart." "I know," Zara said, resting her head against his shoulder. "And Dad, I think the quantum fluctuations the Valdrians are worried about might be connected to something important. Something about the station's power core." Marcus stopped walking entirely. "How do you know about the Valdrians' research?" Zara was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could feel her tension. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I hear things sometimes. Not with my ears. It's hard to explain." Before Marcus could respond, the station's lights flickered. For just a moment, the corridor was plunged into the kind of darkness that would blind most species. But in that instant, Marcus saw something that made his breath catch. Zara's eyes blazed with a soft, luminescent purple light, like stars being born in the depths of space. The glow lasted only a second before the station's lights returned to normal, but it was enough. His daughter wasn't blind. She was seeing something else entirely. As they reached their quarters, Marcus's mind raced with implications and possibilities. What exactly was Zara seeing? How was it connected to the station's mysterious energy readings? And most importantly, why had she been hiding this ability from him? He tucked her into bed, going through their familiar nighttime routine, but his thoughts were spinning. Tomorrow, he would need answers. The problem was, he had no idea where to start looking for them, or what he might discover about the little girl he'd thought he knew so well. Outside their small window, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, holding secrets that Marcus was only beginning to realize his daughter might be able to see. The next morning came too quickly for Marcus, who had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling and replaying that moment in the corridor. The soft purple glow in Zara's eyes had been unmistakable, Yet when he tried to bring up the subject over breakfast, she deflected his questions with the skill of someone far older than 8 years. "I dreamed about beautiful lights last night," she'd said, stirring her synthesized oatmeal with deliberate focus. "Sometimes dreams feel so real, don't they, Dad?" Marcus had let it go, but only temporarily. His shift didn't start until evening, which gave him most of the day to investigate. The problem was that as a human janitor, his access to the station's research databases was severely limited. Most of the advanced scientific information was restricted to researchers with proper clearance levels, something the human maintenance workers definitely didn't possess. But Marcus had learned to be resourceful during his years on the station. When you're essentially invisible to most of the alien researchers, you pick up information in ways they never expect. He dropped Zara off at the daycare center, noting how she seemed to navigate through a crowd of alien children with effortless precision. She never bumped into anyone, never seemed confused about where she was going, and somehow always knew exactly where the adults were standing even when they were completely silent. Mr. Chun called Mrs. Kellen, the elderly human woman who ran the daycare. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Had someone else noticed Zara's unusual abilities? "Of course, Mrs. Kellen. Is everything all right?" The older woman gestured for him to follow her to a quiet corner of the facility, away from the children. She was one of the few other humans on the station, a former teacher who had lost her own family in the same plague that had taken Marcus's wife and daughter. Like him, she'd found purpose in caring for the children of other species. "It's about Zara," she said, her voice low. "Marcus, I've been working with children for over 40 years, across 7 different species. What that little girl can do, it's not normal blindness compensation." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Mrs. Kellen glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Yesterday, she was playing with the other children in the sensory maze we set up for the Krillian younglings. It's designed to be challenging even for species with echolocation abilities. Zara navigated it perfectly, faster than any of the other children, and she was humming the entire time. She wasn't using sound to map her way through. Maybe she memorized the layout? We change the configuration every day," Mrs. Kellen said firmly. "And there's something else. Last week, during story time, I was reading from a text that hadn't been translated into audio format. I was reading silently to myself, preparing for the next day's lesson. Zara was across the room, supposedly napping, but she started asking questions about the story. Detailed questions about parts one hadn't read aloud yet. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of questions? About the quantum mechanics principles discussed in Chapter 12 of the text, the chapter I'd been reading silently. Mrs. Kellen's eyes were troubled. "Marcus, I think your daughter can see things that the rest of us can't. And I think she's been hiding it." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted from the children's area. They hurried over to find Zara, standing perfectly still in the center of the room while chaos swirled around her. The artificial gravity generator had malfunctioned, causing toys and furniture to float randomly through the air. The other children were crying and confused, but Zara was calmly plucking objects out of the air and guiding the smaller children to safe spots. "How did she know where everything was going to float?" whispered one of the Valdrian parents who had come to collect their child. Marcus watched his daughter with new eyes. She wasn't guessing or getting lucky. She was seeing the gravitational fields, somehow perceiving the invisible forces that were causing the objects to move in predictable patterns. The maintenance crew arrived within minutes to fix the gravity generator, and normal operations resumed. But Marcus noticed several of the alien parents watching Zara with expressions of curiosity and something that might have been concern. After the excitement died down, Marcus made his decision. He needed to understand what was happening to his daughter, and that meant doing something he'd never attempted before, breaking into restricted areas of the station. His janitor access card got him into most areas of the station, but the research levels required additional clearance. However, Marcus had observed the daily routines of the alien researchers for 3 years. He knew which laboratories were empty during shift changes, and he learned to read the subtle differences in the security system's status lights. Laboratory Section D housed the station's most advanced quantum research equipment, including sensors that could detect energy patterns across multiple dimensions. If there was anywhere that might have detected Zara's unusual abilities, it would be here. Marcus waited until the shift change at 1,400 hours, when the corridors were briefly empty as one research team departed and another took their places. He slipped into Lab D7, quickly accessing one of the auxiliary computer terminals. The station's databases were vast and complex, designed for minds far more advanced than human intelligence could easily comprehend. But Marcus had learned to navigate the basic research logs over the years, partly out of curiosity and partly because understanding the station's operations made his cleaning duties more efficient. He searched for any unusual energy readings from the past few days, focusing on the areas where he and Zara spent most of their time. What he found made his hands shake as he read the data. There had been consistent quantum fluctuations detected in the residential section, specifically originating from the human quarters. The patterns were unlike anything in the research database, showing characteristics of what the Valdrian scientists described as impossible energy signatures that suggest perception of normally undetectable dimensional layers. But that wasn't the most startling discovery. According to the logs, similar energy patterns had been detected 3 years ago on Kepler 442b, just before the mining colony had been evacuated. The official reports blamed the evacuation on a reactor leak, but the classified sections told a different story. The colony's quantum research team had detected what they termed a developing consciousness with unprecedented sensory capabilities in the days before the evacuation order. The energy signatures matched exactly what was now being detected around Zara. Marcus's blood ran cold as he read further. The evacuation hadn't been due to a reactor leak. It had been ordered because something on that planet was developing abilities that the galactic authorities considered potentially dangerous. Something that could perceive and possibly manipulate quantum fields in ways that threatened the established order of galactic civilization. They had been trying to capture Zara. His hands flew over the keyboard as he accessed deeper files, his heart pounding. The Luminar species was supposed to be extinct, according to the official records. They had been a highly advanced civilization that had disappeared mysteriously several thousand years ago, leaving behind only ruins and scattered references in the archaeological records of other species. But the classified files told a different story. The Luminar hadn't gone extinct. They had been systematically hunted and eliminated by a coalition of galactic powers who feared their abilities. The Luminar could see and manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself, making them potentially capable of destroying entire civilizations or reshaping the galaxy according to their will. Zara wasn't just a blind alien child. She was possibly the last surviving member of the most powerful species the galaxy had ever known, and her abilities were beginning to manifest. A sound in the corridor outside made Marcus freeze. Footsteps were approaching, and he recognized the heavy, measured gait of Valdrian security personnel. His unauthorized access to the research files had triggered some kind of alert. He quickly downloaded what files he could onto a portable storage device, then carefully logged out of the system and made his way to a maintenance closet he'd noticed earlier. The footsteps passed by without stopping, but Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before they traced the security breach back to him. As he made his way back to the daycare center, his mind reeled with the implications of what he discovered. Zara was in danger, far more danger than he'd ever imagined. There were forces in the galaxy that would stop at nothing to prevent another Luminar from reaching full power. But there was something else, something that gave him hope even in the midst of his terror. The research files had mentioned that Luminar abilities were strongest when the individual felt safe, loved, and emotionally stable. Fear and isolation could suppress their powers, while emotional bonds and trust could enhance them exponentially. For 3 years, he'd been providing Zara with exactly what she needed to grow into her heritage. His love, his protection, his unwavering commitment to her well-being had been nurturing the development of abilities that could potentially reshape the galaxy. When he arrived at the daycare center, Zara was sitting quietly in a corner, apparently reading another advanced textbook. But when she sensed his presence, she looked up with an expression of concern that seemed far too mature for her young face. "Dad, you're worried about something," she said softly. "I can feel it from here." Marcus knelt down beside her, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sweetheart, we need to talk. There are some things about you, about who you are, that I think you're ready to understand." Zara's eyes, those deep purple-black pools that he'd thought were sightless, seemed to focus on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. For a moment, he could swear he saw stars wheeling in their depths, entire galaxies spinning in cosmic dance. "I know, Dad," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you to ask the right questions. And I think tonight might be the night when everything changes." Outside the daycare center's windows, the lights of the research station twinkled against the backdrop of space. But Marcus was beginning to understand that the most incredible light in his universe was sitting right in front of him, disguised as a little girl who needed his protection more than ever. That evening, Marcus called in sick to his shift for the first time in 3 years. Instead of reporting to work, he sat across from Zara in their small quarters, the stolen research files spread out on their tiny dining table. The weight of what he'd discovered pressed down on him like the gravity of a collapsed star. "Zara," he began carefully, "I found out some things today about your people, the Luminar, things that I think you might already know." Zara set down the quantum physics textbook she'd been reading and folded her hands in her lap. When she spoke, her voice carried a gravity that belonged to someone much older. "The Luminar were killed because other species feared what we could see," she said quietly. "They thought we would use our abilities to control them, to remake the galaxy in our image. They didn't understand that seeing everything doesn't mean wanting to change everything." Marcus felt his heart break a little at the resignation in her young voice. "How long have you known?" "I've always known what I was, but I didn't understand what it meant until recently." Zara's unseeing eyes turned toward the small porthole that showed the vast expanse of space beyond the station. "I can see the quantum fields that hold everything together, Dad. The energy patterns that connect all matter in the universe. When I was very little, I thought everyone could see them. The energy readings the Valdrians have been detecting." "That's me," Zara confirmed. "As I get older, my perception is expanding. Soon, I won't be able to hide what I can do anymore." Marcus leaned forward, his protective instincts flaring. "What exactly can you do, sweetheart?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she stood and walked to the center of their small living space. She held out her hand, palm up, and closed her eyes in concentration. The air above her palm began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Slowly, patterns of light began to form, swirling in colors that Marcus had no names for. The lights danced and pulsed, creating geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. "I can see the structure of reality," Zara whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "The quantum foam that underlies everything. The probability fields that determine where particles will appear. The gravitational waves that ripple through space-time itself." The lights in her palm grew brighter, more complex. Marcus could swear he saw tiny stars being born and dying in miniature, entire galaxies spinning in the space between her fingers. "But it's more than just seeing," Zara continued. "I can touch these fields, gently nudge them in different directions. That's how I navigate without bumping into things. I can feel the quantum patterns of solid objects, see their boundaries even in complete darkness." The gravity malfunction at the daycare center. I saw exactly how the gravitational fields were going to shift before it happened. Quantum effects ripple backward through time in tiny increments. I can see the probability waves of future events as they collapse into present reality. Marcus stared at his daughter, awe and terror warring in his chest. She was describing abilities that made her potentially the most powerful being in the known galaxy, and she was still just a child. "Zara, The files I found, they said the Galactic Council ordered your species eliminated because they were afraid of what you might do. If they find out about you, they'll try to kill me, Zara said matter-of-factly, the lights in her palm flickering out. I know. That's why I've been hiding my abilities. But, Dad, something is happening on this station. Something that's going to force me to use my powers openly. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, their quarters communication system chimed with an emergency alert. Commander Thale's voice, the Valdrian who served as the station's chief administrator, filled their small living space. Attention, all station personnel. We have detected a catastrophic failure in the main quantum containment system. All non-essential personnel are to report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The quantum containment system was what kept the station's experimental fusion reactor stable. If it failed completely, the resulting explosion would vaporize everything within a light-year radius. Dad, Zara said softly, this is what I've been sensing. The probability waves have been building toward this moment for days. The station's quantum experiments have created an instability in local space-time. The containment field is about to collapse. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less. Zara's voice was calm, but Marcus could see the tension in her small frame. The emergency shelters won't help. The explosion will tear through normal matter like it isn't there. Then, we need to get to an escape pod. Dad, there isn't time. And even if there was, the quantum shockwave will destroy anything within several billion kilometers. We'd never reach minimum safe distance. Marcus stared at his daughter, the terrible understanding beginning to dawn on him. But you could stop it. Zara nodded slowly. I think so. I can see the quantum fields that are causing the instability. If I can manipulate them carefully, redirect the energy patterns, but Dad, if I do this, everyone will know what I am. They'll know a Luminar survived. Around them, the station began to shudder as emergency klaxons wailed. Marcus could hear the sound of panicking alien voices in the corridors, the thunder of feet as thousands of beings scrambled for shelters that wouldn't save them. How many people are on this station? Marcus asked. 47,312, Zara replied instantly, including 215 children in the daycare centers. Marcus thought of Mrs. Kellen, of all the alien families who had become part of his and Zara's extended community over the past 3 years. He thought of the researchers who had dedicated their lives to expanding the boundaries of knowledge, the maintenance workers like himself who kept civilization functioning, the children who deserved the chance to grow up and explore the wonders of the universe. Sweetheart, he said, kneeling down to meet Zara's eyes, I need you to understand something. Your mother, your biological mother, wherever she is now, she would be proud of you no matter what choice you make. And I'm proud of you too. But the decision has to be yours. Zara was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could feel the weight of an 8-year-old girl grappling with a choice that would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the course of galactic history. If I save the station, she said finally, they'll hunt me. The Galactic Council, the military forces, everyone who fears what I represent. They won't stop until I'm dead. Then, we'll run, Marcus said fiercely. We'll find somewhere to hide, somewhere safe. There is nowhere safe for the last Luminar, Zara said sadly. But, Dad, I've been thinking about something. What if they're wrong about my people? What if the Luminar weren't destroyed because they were evil, but because they represented something the galaxy wasn't ready for? The station shuddered more violently, and Marcus could feel the quantum fields themselves beginning to warp around them. Through their porthole, he could see the stars bending and twisting as space-time itself started to collapse. What do you mean? The files you found, they said the Luminar could reshape reality itself. But what if they didn't use that power to conquer? What if they used it to protect, to heal, to help other species reach their full potential? Zara's voice grew stronger, more certain. Dad, humans are the only species in the galaxy that chose to adopt a Luminar child. Everyone else would have been too afraid, too prejudiced. But you saw a little girl who needed help, and you didn't care what species she was. Zara, that's why I think this is happening now, in this place with these people. Maybe it's time for the galaxy to learn that not all power has to be used for destruction. Maybe it's time to show them what the Luminar were really meant to be. Through the walls of their quarters, Marcus could hear the sound of metal beginning to stress and warp as the station's structure struggled against forces it was never designed to contain. In minutes, maybe seconds, the quantum containment field would fail completely. Zara stood up, her small frame somehow seeming to fill the room with presence and purpose. I'm going to save them, Dad. All of them. And then I'm going to show this galaxy something it hasn't seen in 1,000 years. What's that? Zara smiled. And for the first time since he'd known her, Marcus could see light beginning to gather in her dark eyes. Not the soft purple glow he'd glimpsed in the corridor, but something far more powerful. Something that looked like the birth of stars. I'm going to show them what hope looks like when it refuses to hide. The station gave a final, tremendous shudder, and Marcus knew that the moment of no return had arrived. Outside their quarters, the quantum containment field was beginning its catastrophic collapse, and 47,000 lives hung in the balance. It was time for the last Luminar to step out of the shadows. Zara walked to the center of their quarters and closed her eyes, her small hands extended at her sides. The air around her began to shimmer with an energy that Marcus could feel in his bones, a thrumming that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. Dad, I need you to know something, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. What I'm about to do will change me. I won't be able to go back to pretending I'm just a blind human child. Are you ready for that? Marcus looked at his daughter, this 8-year-old girl who was about to attempt something that would either save 47,000 lives or destroy them all. He thought about the past 3 years, about bedtime stories and homework help, about scraped knees and laughter echoing through their small quarters. He thought about the moment he'd found her hiding in those ruins, terrified and alone, and the way she'd trusted him enough to take his hand. Sweetheart, he said softly, I fell in love with your heart, not your abilities. Whatever you become, whatever you can do, you're still my daughter. Nothing in the universe will ever change that. Zara's smile was radiant, and the light beginning to gather around her seemed to respond to his words, growing warmer and more controlled. I love you too, Dad. Now, I need you to stay very still and trust me. The station shuddered again, more violently this time, and Marcus could hear the groaning of metal pushed beyond its limits. Through the communication system, Commander Thale's voice crackled with static and panic. Containment field at 15% and falling. All personnel brace for catastrophic failure. May whatever gods you pray to have mercy on us all. Zara's eyes snapped open, and Marcus gasped. They blazed with purple light, so intense it should have been painful to look at, but instead it felt like looking into the warm heart of creation itself. The light wasn't just in her eyes now. It was flowing through her entire body, running along her skin in patterns that looked like star charts and mathematical equations made of pure energy. I can see it, she whispered, her voice carrying layers of harmonic resonance. The quantum foam is collapsing in a cascade failure. The probability fields are converging on total annihilation. But there's another path, a timeline where the energy is redirected instead of released. The lights in their quarters flickered and died, but the illumination coming from Zara was more than enough to see by. Marcus watched in awe as his daughter raised her hands, her fingers moving in complex patterns that seemed to trace invisible geometric shapes in the air. The quantum fields respond to conscious observation, she continued, her voice growing stronger. The Luminar understood that consciousness and reality are connected at the deepest level. When I observe the quantum patterns, I collapse the probability waves into the timeline I choose. Through the walls of their quarters, Marcus could see the purple light beginning to spread, flowing through the station's corridors like luminous water. Where the light touched, the violent shaking stopped, the groaning of stressed metal faded to silence. Zara, what are you doing to the station? I'm showing the quantum fields what stability looks like, she replied, sweat beading on her forehead for the enormous effort. Every particle, every energy pattern, every gravitational wave. I'm observing them all simultaneously and convincing them to choose harmony over chaos. The communication system crackled back to life, and Marcus could hear the amazement in Commander Thale's voice. Impossible. The containment field is stabilizing. Quantum resonance is returning to normal parameters. How? Is this who is doing this? Marcus looked at his daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't just a child with unusual abilities. This was a being who could perceive and manipulate the fundamental forces that held reality together, who could literally rewrite the laws of physics through the power of conscious observation. And she was his little girl, who still needed help reaching things on high shelves and who laughed at silly jokes about space pirates. "Dad," Zara said, her voice strained with effort, "I need to extend my perception to the entire station. It's going to be overwhelming. If I lose myself in the quantum fields, if I forget who I am, I need you to call me back. Ow! Remind me of who I am beyond my abilities. Remind me of bedtime stories and homework help and the way you make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Remind me that I'm not just a luminar. I'm also your daughter." The purple light around Zara intensified, and Marcus could feel the reality shifting around them. Through the walls, he could sense the presence of every single being on the station. The frightened Valdrian researchers, the confused maintenance workers, the children huddled in the daycare centers. He could feel their heartbeats, their thoughts, their desperate hope that somehow they would survive. And through it all, he could feel Zara's consciousness expanding, stretching across impossible distances as she gathered the quantum fields of the entire station under her protection. For a moment, Marcus was terrified that he'd lost her. Her body stood motionless in the center of their quarters, but her mind seemed to be everywhere at once. The light flowing from her had reached every corner of the station, stabilizing not just the reactor, but every single system that had been affected by the cascade failure. Then he heard her voice, but not with his ears. It resonated directly in his mind, layered with harmonics that spoke of vast cosmic perspective and infinite compassion. "I can see them all, Dad. Every person on this station. Their fears, their hopes, their dreams. They're beautiful. Consciousness is so beautiful when you can see it from this perspective. I understand now why the Luminar were feared. Not because we were evil, but because we could see the infinite potential in every thinking being. That's terrifying to those who prefer to see differences and limitations." Throughout the station, every communication system suddenly activated at once. Zara's voice, still carrying those impossible harmonics, filled every corridor, every room, every corner where sentient beings had gathered to await their fate. "People of Research Station Omega 7, this is Zara Chen speaking. You are safe. The quantum containment failure has been corrected, and your station is now more stable than it has ever been. But I need you to understand something important about what just happened." Marcus could hear the stunned silence that followed, thousands of alien minds struggling to comprehend what they were experiencing. "I am Luminar, the last known survivor of a species your governments believed extinct. For 3 years, I have lived among you, hidden and protected by my human father. Today, I chose to reveal myself to save your lives, because I believe the galaxy is ready to learn something important about my people." The light around Zara began to pulse in rhythm with her words, and Marcus could feel the station's entire population hanging on every syllable. "The Luminar were not destroyed because we were evil. We were destroyed because your ancestors feared our ability to see the truth about consciousness and reality. They were afraid we would use our powers to control and dominate. But control was never our purpose. Our purpose was to help other species recognize their own infinite potential." Marcus watched his daughter's face, seeing the struggle as she fought to maintain her individual identity while her consciousness spanned impossible distances. "Humans have a saying," Zara continued. "They say that love conquers all. For 3 years, my father has shown me what that means. He loved me not despite my nature, but because of the totality of who I am. He taught me that power without love is meaningless, and that the greatest strength comes not from what you can do, but from what you choose to do. The purple light began to fade slightly, and Marcus could see Zara's consciousness starting to contract back toward her physical form. But something was wrong. She was having trouble finding her way back to herself. I choose to use my abilities to protect, to heal, to help others reach their full potential, she said, but her voice was becoming distant, ethereal. I choose to show the galaxy what the Luminar were meant to be, but the quantum fields are so vast, so beautiful. It would be easy to lose myself in them forever. Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. This was the moment she'd warned him about. In saving 47,000 lives, Zara was in danger of losing herself in the infinite expanse of cosmic consciousness. Zara, he called out, his voice cutting through the harmonic resonance that filled the station. Come back to me, sweetheart. Come back to your dad who loves pancakes and bad jokes and the way you laugh when I tell stories about the old human space explorers. The purple light flickered, and Marcus could see Zara's consciousness wavering between the cosmic and the personal. Come back to the little girl who reads quantum physics textbooks for fun and who still needs help reaching things on high shelves, he continued, pouring all of his love into every word. Come back to Sunday mornings and bedtime stories and the way we make shadow puppets on the wall. The light around Zara suddenly snapped back into focus, and her eyes met his. For a moment, he could see both aspects of her nature in perfect balance. The cosmic being who could reshape reality, and the 8-year-old girl who was his daughter. "Hi, Dad," she whispered, and collapsed into his arms. Throughout the station, the emergency klaxons fell silent. The lights returned to normal, and in 47,000 minds, a new understanding began to take root, that power and love were not opposites, but the two halves of what consciousness could become when it reached its full potential. The age of hiding was over. The last Luminar had announced herself to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the hours following Zara's revelation, Research Station Omega 7 became the most important location in the galaxy. Within 6 hours, representatives from every major galactic government were demanding immediate transport to the station. Within 12 hours, the Galactic Council had called an emergency session to address what they termed the Luminar situation. Within 18 hours, military fleets from 7 different species were positioned at the edge of the system, ostensibly for protection and observation. Marcus held Zara close as they watched the approaching ships through their small porthole. She seemed smaller now, more fragile, as if the enormous effort of saving the station had drained something essential from her. But her eyes, while no longer blazing with cosmic light, still held depths that spoke of infinite understanding. "They're afraid," she said softly, her head resting against his shoulder. "Are you?" Zara considered the question seriously. "No, not anymore. I spent 3 years afraid of being discovered, afraid of what would happen when the galaxy learned what I was. But now I think I understand something important." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, their door chimed. Commander Thale stood in the corridor, flanked by 2 security officers. The tall Valdrian's crystalline features were unreadable, but Marcus could sense the tension radiating from him. "Mr. Chun, we need to speak with your daughter," Thale said formally. "The Galactic Council has demanded immediate custody of the Luminar child pending a full investigation." Marcus stepped protectively in front of Zara. "She has a name, and she's not going anywhere without me." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Thale replied, though he didn't sound pleased about it. "Human custody of a Luminar is unprecedented. The Council believes the child requires specialized containment until her intentions and capabilities can be fully assessed." Containment? Marcus felt his anger rising. She just saved 47,000 lives. What more assessment do you need? "Dad, it's okay," Zara said, stepping out from behind him. When she spoke to Commander Thale, Her voice carried a quiet authority that made the Valdrian take an unconscious step backward. "Commander, I understand the Council's concerns, but I won't be going into any containment facility." "Child, you don't understand the forces at play here," Thale said, his voice gentling slightly. "There are species in this galaxy that would destroy entire star systems to prevent another Luminar from reaching full power. The only way to protect you is—" "The only way to protect me," Zara interrupted, "is to show the galaxy that their fears are unfounded. And I can't do that from inside a cage." She walked to the center of their small quarters, and once again the air began to shimmer with subtle energy. But this time, instead of the overwhelming cosmic display from before, the light was gentle, controlled, almost playful. Tiny stars began to dance in the air around her, perfect miniature replicas of actual stellar bodies. Marcus recognized some of them from the educational holo programs they'd watched together. Sol, the human homeworld star, Valdris Prime, the heart of the Valdrian system, dozens of others representing the major civilizations of the galaxy. "This is what I see when I look at the galactic community," Zara said, her voice carrying to every corner of the station through quantum resonance. "Not enemies or threats to be contained, but beautiful points of light, each one unique and precious. Each one part of a larger pattern that's more magnificent than any individual star could be alone." The miniature stars began to move, orbiting around each other in complex patterns that created new constellations, new relationships, new possibilities for cooperation and growth. "The old Luminar made a mistake," she continued. "They withdrew from the galaxy when other species began to fear them. They became isolated, secretive, confirming the worst suspicions about their intentions. I won't make that same mistake." Commander Thale stared at the cosmic display, his crystalline features reflecting the light of a dozen tiny suns. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing to do something no Luminar has ever done before," Zara replied. "I'm going to teach others how to see what I see. Not to give them my specific abilities, but to help them expand their own consciousness beyond the limitations they've accepted." The implications of her words sent a shock through everyone present. Teaching other species to perceive reality at quantum levels would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. It would democratize abilities that had previously been the exclusive province of the most advanced races. "The humans have a concept called open source," Zara said, and Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. "They believe that knowledge becomes more powerful when it's shared freely rather than hoarded. I want to open source consciousness itself." Marcus felt a surge of pride that nearly overwhelmed him. His daughter wasn't just offering to share her gifts. She was proposing to revolutionize the very nature of galactic civilization. "That's impossible," Thale whispered. "The neural structures required for quantum perception don't exist in most species. The evolutionary adaptations can be guided," Zara said simply. "Not through genetic manipulation, but through conscious evolution. Every species in this galaxy has the potential for expanded awareness. They just need someone to show them the way." She gestured, and the dancing stars transformed into complex geometric patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Marcus could feel his own perception stretching as he watched, catching glimpses of underlying structures he'd never noticed before. "Dad," Zara said, turning to him with excitement sparkling in her dark eyes, "remember how you taught me to ride the magnetic transit system? You didn't change my biology. You just showed me how to use abilities I already had. This is the same thing, but with consciousness itself." Before anyone could respond, the station's communication system activated with an incoming message from the Galactic Council. The holographic image of Counselor Vrex, a being whose species Marcus didn't recognize, materialized in their quarters. "Luminar child," the counselor said without preamble. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding your status. You will be taken into protective custody immediately and transported to a secure research facility where your abilities can be studied and contained for the safety of all galactic civilizations." Zara looked at the hologram with what Marcus had learned to recognize as her thinking expression. When she spoke, Her voice carried the weight of cosmic authority. Counselor Vrex, I appreciate your concern for galactic safety, but I have a counter-proposal. You are a child. Vrex replied dismissively. You have no standing to make proposals to this council. Actually, Zara said, and Marcus could see her beginning to glow with control power, I do. As the last known representative of the Luminar species, I have the right under Galactic Charter Article 7 to claim sovereign status and petition for recognition as an independent entity. Marcus watched as every alien in the room, including Commander Thale, went very still. He didn't understand the legal implications, but clearly they did. Furthermore, Zara continued, I formally request asylum with the human government, as they have already demonstrated their willingness to treat me as a person rather than a weapon to be controlled. She turned to Marcus with a grin that was pure 8-year-old mischief. Dad, think the human ambassador would be willing to adopt me officially? For political reasons? Marcus laughed, feeling the tension that had gripped him for hours finally beginning to ease. Sweetheart, I think Ambassador Williams would be honored, especially when he finds out what you're planning to teach humanity. The hologram of Counselor Vrex flickered with what might have been frustration. This is highly irregular. The Luminar species has been considered extinct for over a millennium. Their legal standing was never revoked, Zara finished smoothly. I did my homework, Counselor, and under the protection of humanity, I will begin establishing the Luminar Institute for Expanded Consciousness, open to all species, dedicated to peaceful exploration of reality's deeper layers. She gestured again, and the miniature stars returned, but now they were connected by streams of light that pulsed with information and energy. It was a vision of the galaxy as it could become. Not a collection of isolated civilizations, but a true community of consciousness working together to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. The age of fear is ending, Zara announced to the galaxy. The age of expansion is about to begin, and this time we're going to do it together. Marcus looked at his daughter, this remarkable being who had saved 47,000 lives and was now proposing to revolutionize galactic civilization, and felt his heart swell with a love so vast it seemed to match the scope of her cosmic awareness. Zara, he said softly, your mother would be so proud. Both of them, she replied, taking his hand as they watched humanity's first starship arrive to escort them to their new future. Outside their porthole, the stars danced in patterns that suddenly seemed less random and more like a vast cosmic conversation just waiting for the right voices to join in. The last Luminar was no longer hiding, and the galaxy would never be the same. But sometimes, Marcus reflected as he watched his daughter begin teaching Commander Thale to perceive quantum fluctuations with his naked eyes. Change was exactly what the universe needed. The human janitor and his alien daughter were about to give the galaxy the greatest gift imaginable. The chance to see itself clearly for the first time in millennia. And it all started with one man who chose to love a scared child, regardless of what species she belonged to. In the end, perhaps that was the most human thing of all. The willingness to extend family beyond the boundaries of biology, to choose love over fear, and to believe that understanding was always more powerful than control. The stars were singing, and finally, someone was teaching the galaxy how to listen.